Alrighty, we are now live and everyone can join. So those of you who are joining, if you're on Zoom, our standard welcome, hello, nice to see you. Don't forget to change your settings on Zoom to speak to everyone. If you would like to speak to everyone, if your little bar says panelists, make sure to change it to all panelists and attendees. We do have a few new people joining us this time from some libraries in Ontario. If you are new, you are welcome to do the exact same thing and share your location if you would like. It is one of our traditions, it seems, with our live streams. And Kim Hay is out observing today. So today we are going to be talking about, we have a special edition. We have an edition for libraries today. So we're going to be covering some topics about books and introducing the RASC a little bit for those who are new to the organization. I am Jenna, I'm the outreach coordinator at RASC, and of course Chris Vaughn is here, who is our resident astronomer and also AstroGeo guy. I'll talk briefly about national. We do, RASC we're an astronomy organization and we are all amateur astronomers for the most part. And so we just like to go out and look at the sky. We have centers across Canada. When we are not in COVID times, we meet up and go and look at space. But right now we're doing most of that virtually. We have observing programs that mean that you can get certificates for seeing certain things in space. We have all sorts of different online activities that you can participate in, including right now we're doing a moon observing program called the Moon at Noon. And of course we have Insider's Guide, which runs every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. And that's going to continue indefinitely because it seems that so is lockdown. So we might as well just keep going. We have a couple publications. We have SKYNEWS magazine, which I don't know if I have a copy on hand, but is our premier magazine that we produce. Do you have a copy, Chris? I don't think I have one. Chris regularly writes for SKYNEWS as well. You can check out their content. They have lots of astronomy content at skynews.ca.
Grab one.
Okay, sounds good. Chris has actually, I'll wait till he gets back to say that. I will say that after COVID sort of relieves a little bit, there's SKYNEWS, hooray.
And I have an article in this issue.
There you go. Chris saves the day on SKYNEWS many times. Yeah, we have our Observer's Handbook. I have my copy here. This is our, it's all you need to observe for the year 2021. It goes over everything that's going to be happening that year in the world of astronomy, not all things. It has lists of, one of my favorite parts of the charts that tell you exactly where all the moons of the different satellite planets are, which I think is really cool. It has lists about eclipses. It has things that are going to be special each month so that you can get a jump start on all the people on social media who go out and take photos of it. You can jump in early and get those photos yourself. And finally, Chris, I wanted you to highlight your blog as well.
Yeah, so every Sunday afternoon, I sit down and I write a blog or a little newsletter about what's going on in the sky this week. And I mean, I'm based in the GTA, so I emphasize some of that, but I also try to make it pretty much global. And it's called Astronomy Skylights. And if anybody's interested, let me share my screen so I can show you what that looks like. And I'll just bring it over here. So Astronomy Skylights, it's free. You can come to my website, astrogeo.ca, and read it every Sunday, or you can click a button to subscribe to it and just get it by email every Sunday afternoon. It'll tell you when the space station is going over, when the great red spot's visible on Jupiter, where the planets are, meteor showers, comets, everything you can think of that might be happening this week. So that's a cool thing that we can offer for you if you're interested in keeping up to date on things. And it's written for non-experts. So it's basically designed for families to read together, maybe take their phone outside and follow my instructions. I tell you what direction to face and how high in the sky to find an object and things like that. Like Mars, we're going to talk about that today too.
Yes. So before we get too far into our presentation, we just wanted to begin our talk with the land acknowledgement. We are, of course, a national organization, and we would like to commemorate Indigenous peoples' principal kinship to the land. And we recognize that they have not been and cannot be erased. Acknowledgements are a starting place to change how the land is seen and talked about. While we meet today on a virtual platform, coming from communities all across the country and in some cases the world. We at RASC would like to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and in our understanding of local Indigenous peoples and cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we would like to acknowledge the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call these lands home. And now we will jump into some of our content today because we are going to be talking about books, and in this case, Harry Potter.
Yeah, so this has always been fascinated ever since, because I'm an astronomer, first before Harry Potter came out. When I started reading Harry Potter and with my daughter and watching the movies, I was picking up on these cool familiar names that I knew from astronomy. And so what I thought I'd do today is show everybody where in the sky they can find some of these familiar names and places that are mentioned in the books. And I even thought what we do is we look at the stars and the planets on the day that Harry Potter was born. So I thought that was cool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a program called Stellarium. So I'm going to share my screen again and bring up Stellarium here. So Stellarium is a free program that you can find online. It's at stellarium.org. Jenna can, I'm sure, share the link with everybody. And once you download it and install it on your computer, you can set the date and time to any time you want to see the sky, daytime or nighttime. And you can also set it up to show you the sky from anywhere on Earth. So that's really cool. So what I'm going to do is start out by showing you the sky. And by the way, this is like a video game. So it's a virtual surround. Some people think that this is like a webcam, but really it's just a photograph that somebody took in a round and stitched it together to make a panorama. And I can use the software to really show different panoramas from different places. So for example, if I wanted to take us to Stonehenge, I could do that. Or if I wanted to take us to the pyramids in Egypt, I could do that. So this is the kind of thing we play with in Stellarium. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my bookmarks here, and I have prepared a bookmark so that I can take us to southwestern England on July 31st, 1980, which is Harry Potter's birthday. So let me bring this in. Here we go. And I do this, and I do this. Nope, it should take me there. There we go. So here we are near Plymouth, England, southwestern England, on July 31st, 1980. And this is just at sunset. And I'm showing you that in the western sky. Let me just change the horizon so we can see a little more clearly what we have here. How about, does this one open it up a little bit for us? Here we go. So when the character of Harry Potter was born on that date, he had in the evening sky, his parents would have seen Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in a line. And of course, the reason that the planets form kind of a line like that is because they're all orbiting in the same plane of our solar system. In fact, I can even draw a line that shows the plane of our solar system. So that's the evening sky. And then if I swing around and look to the east and go into the morning, then what we'll find is we also had Venus, and I think Mercury is going to be there too. So Mercury, so all the bright planets were visible. I don't know whether J.K. Rowling designed it this way, but I think that's pretty cool that Harry Potter's parents had all the bright planets, including a nice waning gibbous moon as well at the same time. So that's cool. Now, the constellations, let me just go back to Thornhill here. I just bring this back to, here we go. Oops, let's go back to now. Getting ahead of myself here. All right. So the houses at Hogwarts, where Harry and his friends went to school, are divided into the 4 houses. So we've got Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Gryffindor. And each of those houses is associated with an animal. So what we'll do is we'll just advance the time, let the stars come out tonight. And I'm just going to connect the dots here and show you the constellations in the nighttime sky. So if you go out after dinner on a clear night, I don't know if tonight will be clear where you are, but if the skies are clear after the sun goes down tonight, wherever you live, if you face into the west, you'll see the constellation of Orion. Okay. And then we'll use it as our sort of anchor point from what we're going to talk about. So the constellation, the House of Gryffindor, its sort of featured animal is the lion. And so there is one constellation that is Leo the lion. And to find that one, you would start in the west, you could turn it around and face south. And there you've got Leo the lion shining over the southern, about halfway up the southern sky. Now, the horizon line is straight in front of you, and the Z, the green Z that I've got on my screen here, would be straight over your head. So if an object is closer to the Z than the ground, it means it's fairly high up in the sky. If it's closer to the ground, then you look lower. If it's closer to the Z, then you're going to look higher. So Leo is quite distinctive. It's got a curve of stars forming the lion's mane, his head. He's got his throat at the star Algeba. He's got his heart, it's this bright star Regulus. Regulus is the brightest star. And then if you look to the left, you'll find a few more stars that make his tail and back haunches, his back quarters. Now, Jenna said something to me a number of months ago, and that was that this is not a lion, it's a mouse. And so there's the mouse's nose, his eye, and the curved stars make the mouse's tail, which I think is really cool. So you can decide for yourself whether you think the constellation is a lion or a mouse. But for Harry Potter and Hogwarts purposes, we're calling it Leo the lion. We just bring up a picture of the lion so you can see the lion shape. All right. Now, Slytherin is the snake, and there are actually two different snakes in the sky. And one of them is right below the lion, and that's called Hydra. So Hydra is a water snake. And the stars that form Hydra form a little circle of stars or a group of stars for the head. And then the body of the snake winds down and around, down and around, down and around to the bottom, almost to the horizon in the evening. So let me just bring this back to an earlier time here. Okay, so that's Hydra, the water snake. There's also another constellation called Serpens the snake, but it's part of the summertime sky. All right, so Ravenclaw is the constellation of the eagle. So let's just bring up the sky later here. So right time in April and during the time of the year when we're in April, the eagle doesn't rise in the sky until quite late in the evening. But maybe around getting closer to midnight or so. And this is the eagle. Let me just bring up the constellation here. There's the eagle. And the eagle's visible all summer long and into the autumn. Now, Hufflepuff's a bit of a challenge because Hufflepuff's animal is the badger. And there actually is not a constellation for a badger. So we have a couple of alternate options to pick from. There is a constellation called Lynx, which is the sort of a mountain lion. Let me see if I can find the lynx for you here. He's up here. Here we go. The stars don't really look too interesting. There's sort of a crooked line. That's Lynx, the mountain lion. Then we have a constellation called the Vulpecula, which is the fox. Vulpecula's back over here near the eagle. Let's see if I can find him for you. There's Vulpecula. It's kind of a boring constellation too. It's just basically a straight line in the sky. Then we have Lupus, the wolf. Lupus is not easily visible for us. And then finally, I was thinking that we could just borrow a constellation and pretend it's a badger. And so one of the ones I was thinking of to do that would be the Big Dipper. So let me just get us back to the Big Dipper here.
Arguably, the Big Dipper looks more like a badger than a bear, I would say.
Yeah, he's got a kind of a long, kind of a stubby body and maybe a long neck and a head if you sort of turn him around. Or you could use all the stars and kind of pretend that the bear shape is kind of a badger shape. You know, depending on how you connect the stars, even though the constellations are official in a sense, there's no harm or problem with any one of us picturing different shapes in the stars that we want to adopt for our own uses. So the Big Dipper is a possibility. And then the last one I was thinking of was the constellation of Capricornus. And Capricornus comes up later here. Let's see if I can find Capricornus for us here. Here's Capricornus. I'll just turn off the daylight for a second to bring him up. So Capricornus has sort of got a stubby shape, kind of a triangle. So I don't know, maybe it's not as good. So what I was thinking of doing is having everybody do a poll and decide what they think they would like to use for Hufflepuff. So Jenna, maybe you could run the poll for everybody.
Alrighty, the poll is live. So you can vote between Big Dipper, the Lynx, Vulpecula, Capricorn, or Capricornus, and Lupus. Cast your votes now. We'll leave it open for another 15 seconds or so. I'm seeing the trends on this end. I'm excited to reveal the answer. Chris, can you see the answers coming in?
No.
Oh, hoo-hoo. All right, we're going to close it in 3, 2, 1. Sorry, like 5 poll answers came in right as I said 1. All right, we're going to end it now. And our winner is the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper looks most like a badger. And I think
very good. Okay, so I'm going to, before we finish today, I'll show you where to find the Big Dipper in the sky. So if you go out in the evening, let me just bring up my time clock here. So this is the sky around 9 o'clock. It doesn't really get dark now until about 9 o'clock. If you head outside and you face east, which is opposite where the sun went down, of course, and look about quite high. So there's the Z. Remember, you're looking really high when the Z's nearby. The Big Dipper is actually there. It's in the east, northeastern sky, quite high, and it's actually standing on its handle. So the handle's pointing down to the star Alkaid, which is the bottom of the handle. So you've got 3 stars making the bent handle, and then you've got 4 stars making the bowl of the Dipper. So that's where you find the Big Dipper during evening in April, standing up on its tip in the eastern sky. All right, so what else can we talk about? We can talk about the constellation of the Phoenix. So the Phoenix is, of course, part of the Order of the Phoenix, is mentioned in the Order of the Phoenix, and it's actually a very southerly constellation. So if I bring up the equator, so this is the equator across the sky. This means that the sky has just like on Earth, we have a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. The sky has a northern hemisphere of stars and a southern hemisphere of stars. And the stars like the Big Dipper and the ones that we see all year round are in the northern hemisphere, but there are ones that we don't really get to see because they don't rise in Canada. And the Phoenix is one of those. So let me just put where Phoenix comes in right around, let's see if I can find Phoenix for us. Time of year does it come? I think this is Phoenix right here. So Phoenix,
just below the horizon.
Yeah, there's Phoenix. So Phoenix isn't visible in Canada because it's hidden below the horizon. But if you actually were able to get in your car and drive south in the United States someday when COVID's done, if you travel to the south, then Phoenix it gets high enough in the sky for you to be able to see it. So for us, right around in the evening in November timeframe every year, Phoenix, a few of the stars of Phoenix just barely sneak above the horizon for us. For where I am in the Toronto area at latitude 43, if you live a little bit farther north, then it probably won't peak up. And if you live maybe a little bit south, like southwestern Ontario, London, or some of the more southerly parts of Canada, then you might see a few more of the stars of the Phoenix. All right, so let's go back to tonight and let's look at some of the things that we can see in Harry Potter. So the first, I'm going to actually start in the west and then traverse the east because the things in the west set first. So right around 9 o'clock, I'm just going to actually wind back a little bit earlier before the sun is gone completely and the sky is completely dark. Here you can see that we have the part of the constellation of Andromeda. So Andromeda is is done for this year. It's visible more in the wintertime, but now that we're getting into the spring, it's starting to hide near the sun in the western sky in the evening. So Andromeda comes from Andromeda Black, one of Harry Potter's relatives. She was a blood witch. She was the widow of Ted Tonks, and she was the mom of Nymphadora Tonks. So if you remember Tonks from Harry Potter, she was the mom. The next one I have is Luna. So the moon, the Latin name for moon is Luna. And of course, Luna, the moon, gives us the character Luna Lovegood, one of Harry's friends. And the moon is going to be visible for a little while after sunset tonight. And later this week, the moon will become easier and easier to see every night after dinner if you go out once it's starting to get dark, once the sun goes down. We also have, let me just bring up my bookmarks because they'll help me to hop around. I'm going to go to Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia is that funny W-shaped constellation. Remember, here's Andromeda. So Cassiopeia is sitting just up to the right of Andromeda. Cassiopeia is the great aunt of Sirius, and Sirius Black was Harry's godfather. How about Draco? Draco's up in the sky. Where's my Draco? Here we go. So Draco you'll find next to the Big Dipper. Remember I showed you where the Big Dipper was in the northeast? Well, here's Draco. So Draco actually sits near Polaris, the North Star, wraps around it. It's a long, windy constellation. So it's in the northeastern sky. The next one I have in my list is a star called Merope, M-E-R-O-P-E. Let me see if I can find Merope for you here. Here we go. And for this, I'm going to make it a little bit darker. It's right around 9 o'clock. So Merope is one of the stars in the Pleiades cluster. In the Pleiades cluster, you might have seen the Pleiades. They're kind of famous as a beautiful clump of stars with a blue nebulosity around it. The nebulosity is caused by interstellar dust and gas scattering starlight. And Merope is one of these bright stars, which are called the Seven Sisters. And Merope is kind of in the middle of the cluster near the bottom. So if you get your binoculars out and look at the Pleiades cluster before, just when it's getting dark out, then Merope is kind of the one near the bottom and to the left a little bit of the cluster. So Merope was actually, she actually gave birth to Tom Marvolo Riddle. And we all know who Tom Riddle is, don't we? He goes by another name, which we don't want to mention, perhaps. Yeah, so Merope is the mother of Voldemort. All right, what's next? How about Orion? So as I mentioned before, Orion is visible in the southwestern sky at about 9 o'clock tonight. So Orion Black was Sirius Black's father, and Sirius Black had a brother named Regulus. We'll come to Regulus in a minute. But Orion, the constellation, contains a famous star named Bellatrix. And Bellatrix is Bellatrix Lestrange. So she's Sirius Black's cousin. And she did something to Sirius. I don't think I want to spoil it, but let's just say that she's kind of bad. She spent time in Azkaban prison. And so the word Bellatrix actually comes from Latin. It means female warrior or Amazon star. So that's Bellatrix. Now, you may have noticed that we've got the star Sirius. So Sirius is actually the brightest star in the constellation of the Big Dog or Canis Major. And that's why Sirius has the nickname the Dog Star. And J.K. Rowling adopted the name Sirius for Harry's godfather because the character was an animagus who had the ability to transform himself into a dog. And so the name Sirius was used because Sirius is the dog star. Sirius is also the brightest star in the entire sky except the sun. And so if you head outside and look for Sirius, it's pretty low. So if there are trees or buildings in the way, you may need to walk around to get around them to find Sirius. But if you can find Orion, then Sirius will be just down a little bit lower and a little bit to the left. And what's cool is you watch Sirius for a minute or two, and if you can see it twinkle, because when stars are low in the sky, they twinkle more because we're viewing them through more atmosphere. And Sirius can give you flashes of yellow and red and blue and green and white, all the different colors of the rainbow as the light from the star is being diffracted and refracted by the Earth's atmosphere. So Sirius is famous for those beautiful flashes of color because it's so bright and so low in the sky. All right, what do we got next? I've got Pollux. So Pollux is in the constellation of Gemini, which is just above Orion. Pollux is the easterly or left hand of the two twin stars of Gemini. Pollux Black was the grandfather of Sirius on his mother's side. Next one I've got is a star named Alphard. Where's my Alphard here? If I can find Alphard. Oops, that's not the one I want. Let's go back. Go back this way. So Alphard is here. So remember we talked about the Slytherin snake? Well, Alphard is actually the brightest star in the constellation of Hydra, the water snake. So Alphard was Sirius Black's uncle. He left his fortune to Sirius, and so the Black family kind of disowned him. They were unhappy with that. Remember, he's represented by a burn mark in the family tapestry, if you remember the movie. Now, Alphard, of course, was in Slytherin house, which is fitting because he's the brightest star in the constellation of Hydra. All right, Regulus. So look, here's Regulus. Regulus is right above. Regulus is part of our friendly lion that we talked about. Remember, it's the heart of the lion. So Regulus was Sirius Black's younger brother, and he became a Death Eater at a young age and served the wrong side of the fight. Now, it's possible that Regulus was actually a good guy. I think later on he kind of reformed himself and came back onto the side of good. And the clue of that is that J.K. Rowling used the name Regulus, and he's a Leo. So perhaps he should have actually been a Gryffindor, which is cool. All right, now let's see, Arcturus. Arcturus is the next Harry Potter character. Arcturus is Sirius Black's grandfather, okay? And then finally, I got two more. One is in later in the evening, so I've got to let the sky have a chance to rise in the east. And here we find the constellation of Cygnus. Remember there's our eagle. So our eagle from Ravenclaw comes up almost after midnight nowadays. But by the time we get to the summer months, in June or July, you'll be able to see these constellations as soon as it gets dark out, no problem. So Cygnus is another uncle of Cygnus is another uncle of Sirius Black. And the last character that I want to talk about is Professor Aurora Sinistra, and she was the astronomy teacher at Hogwarts. And her name Aurora comes from the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights, which I can't show you on Stellarium because they're not available on demand, but I do have them behind my head. So that's the Aurora Borealis behind my head. So her name implies that she was somebody on the side of good, the side of light, and not a practitioner of the dark arts. So there's your tour of the constellations and the features in the sky related to Harry Potter. And Jenna's going to talk about making your own Starfinder and maybe how you can maybe circle or highlight some of the objects in your Starfinder to help you go out and do your own Harry Potter tour of the sky.
Yes. Before we jump to that, I also wanted to answer some quick little clarification questions that have come up. The characters in Harry Potter were named after the object in the sky, not the other way around.
That's right.
Just to be clear. And it seems like J.K. Rowling did that very purposefully.
Yeah, exactly. So she dropped little breadcrumbs. So she picked Regulus because Regulus is in the lion, and she picked Alphard because Alphard's in the snake, and things like that. And Sirius being the dog. Yeah.
And then the other question that Atul Dave mentioned was, is Arcturus the one that has multiple colors? And I will mention that being in Toronto and seeing Arcturus from my window, I have seen it be very colorful. So I think, but that's because it's low in the sky right now, probably, I guess, eh, Chris?
Yeah, any bright star will twinkle more when it's lower. And so it could, it could in theory show a few variations in color, but really Sirius has the prize. It's the one that everybody remembers as being giving off the flashes of color.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just clarifying those questions. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to ask them as we go along. I'm going to show you the RASC Starfinder, which I actually have a physical copy of here, if you can believe it. So these are what we used to hand out when we had in-person events. These are little tools that you can use to figure out what the sky looks like at any point. And the way that it works, and I'll show this on the screen as well, but there's a circle here that has the date and a circle here that doesn't move that has the time. And you can line up the date with the time and get an idea of exactly what the sky looks like at that point. Also kind of cool is that, for example, if we line this up and we're, say, observing at 9 p.m. in April, that's the same sky that we would see at 3 a.m. in January. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to show you the online version and send the link in a minute. So this is available on our website. You can go to rasc.ca/star-finder, which I will send in the chat in a second, to either buy them, these individual things from us, or download one that is in black and white and cut it out, print it, and put it together. So it's just these two pieces separately. You cut out a hole from the middle and then slide them together like that. When you go out and observe with these, so this of course won't change. This is set up for Canada and like the southern parts of Canada specifically. So this is what the sky would look like from the southern parts of Canada. If you went to, let's say, Argentina, it would look completely differently and it would not work. So just a heads up, this is just for Canada. When you're using them, it has the horizons labeled for which way you're looking. So this is the southern horizon, that's the northern horizon. You want to put whichever one you're looking at the bottom. So if you're usually, it seems astronomers always observe to the south, I guess because that's where all the interesting stuff is. And so if you're facing south,
but you might have trees at your house, so you might be always looking in a different direction, right?
Exactly, and that's important because the sky is a giant half sphere above us. This is a flat sheet of paper. It's not quite the same. So you have to make those adjustments depending on where you are. If you're looking south, you'll want to keep the southern horizon at the bottom. If you're looking north, it actually helps to turn it upside down and put the northern horizon at the bottom. And that way you'll be looking, the stars that you see along this part of the Starfinder will be along the horizon that you're looking at. When it comes to making a Harry Potter specific one, Chris has already done that for you. So I'm going to first send out that link that I copied. There's the Starfinder link. And then I'm going to show you Chris's Starfinder, which is not that one, this one. The link for this is on our website at rasc.ca/insidersguide. This is a really long file name. I will send it out, but it is long, so it's also available at Insider's Guide. And it has some of those special Harry Potter ones already highlighted for you.
Yeah, so it's the same idea. You just turn the direction you're facing towards the bottom of the circle. And then anything that's near the Z in the middle will be straight over your head. And if you go back to Heavens Above for a sec, Jenna, we can show people quickly. So if you go back to the main menu and go down to where it says old version. Yeah, astronomy, sky chart, old version. Oh, close that up.
There we go.
And then go down, yeah. And what I did is I just made mine black on white. And I actually made mine 1,000 just to make it a little more resolution. So rather than, and if you update, yeah. And when if you see while you're there, you can also set to any date and time. So what I did is I set ours to, I think, 9 o'clock today. So that's 2100 hours would be 9 p.m. And this would be valid in your local time. So it doesn't matter if it's Eastern time, Pacific time, Central time. If it's 9 o'clock, the chart you make is for 9 o'clock, then that's for your local where you live.
You do have to set your local address because I have not set my spot.
Oh yeah, yeah. The first thing you have to do is set your location. So you can click on the location and you could actually put a pin on a map to show where you live. Mm-hmm. But I've done it for you for, now the one that I made is valid anywhere, will be valid anywhere local time in Southern Canada, really. It'll be valid for anybody, so.
Thank you, Chris, for making that. I will also add that if you're planning on going on a trip or something like that over the summer, which COVID restrictions, etc. But if you're planning on going out specifically to see dark skies, you can go and use this to figure out exactly what your sky is going to look like, which is very helpful if you're looking to see something specific while you're out there. There is a question in the Q&A. What does the Z stand for? The Z is the, hold on, I forgot to answer that live. The Z is the zenith, right?
Yeah, it's
The
Z
straight up
stands for
point.
zenith, and it just means a marker to show you where straight up would be.
So, and that answers Peter's question as well, which is why is the Z position different from the Polaris position? Because Z is directly overhead, whereas Polaris is directly overhead if you're at the North Pole. So we're not at the North Pole. So in our case, Polaris will be whatever latitude we're at, down.
That's right.
Yeah, from the Z.
All right.
Yeah, and also Warren Gallagher mentioned that you can see the sky on the date that you were born as well, which you can do in Stellarium too, but that's an option if you're making a sky chart as well.
Yeah, the difference with the paper starfinders is they won't show you where the planets were. They'll show you the arc of the solar system line, but not exactly where the planets are. It's designed to be used on any year, any day, any time. And the only thing that is predictable are the star positions, not the moon and the planets. For that, you would use Stellarium or something else, or an app.
Yeah. Joanna asks, is there a list of all the Harry Potter characters? Chris, did you want to make all that research public? Because that was a lot of effort that you put into that.
Yeah, you could cut and paste the section with the names, sure, into the chat.
I'm not sure if it'll all show up, so I'll do my best to copy and paste it in sections just to get an idea of who's who.
Well, the other thing you could do is folks could actually watch it back on YouTube and just jot down the names as we go through them. That's another way you could do it.
Yeah, so you can give that a shot. You've certainly named more Harry Potter characters than I ever knew existed, so you did a great job with that.
All right, I'm going to actually share my screen and tell you a story. Let's do this. And I'm going to tell you a story about this little guy. So this is an animal called a fisher. It's native to Canada. And in Ojibwe, the fisher's name is Ojig. And I love this story because it talks about sharing, about planning and teamwork, about perseverance and bravery and all kinds of other things. And before I do that, I'm going to switch back to my Stellarium for a minute here. And I'm going to bring up the Ojibwe constellations, which you can do in Starlore. And this comes built into Stellarium. So when you download it, you get this. So here's the Ojibwe constellations, and I'm going to show you the artwork. And remember that I said the Big Dipper was standing on its handle. Let's go back into the evening here. Let's just do around 9 o'clock. Here we go. So there's that northeastern sky. The Big Dipper now is being interpreted by the Ojibwe people as the constellation of Ojig, or the fisher. You can see he's got a long, lengthy body, a long tail, and short, stubby legs, just like our friend in the picture. Okay. So here's the story. So the fisher is a small animal. He's related to the weasel. And the Anishinaabe people consider him a great hunter. Long ago, he lived in a winter world with humans, birds, and other animals. But at that time, there was no such thing as the different seasons. Wherever you lived was what you got all year round. So for them, he lived in the winter world, and that's all they ever saw. And during one particularly cold winter, a lot of animals perished from the cold and lack of food. And one day, the fisher decided that his only hope was to find some way to get to the summer world and bring back the warm weather. The villagers of the animals of the summer world weren't willing to share their summer, so Fisher called all the winter animals and birds together to discuss what they should do. Now, the muskrat, who lived between the two seasons, was the only animal who knew that summer was hidden on a faraway island. In the center of this island, there stood a lodge, and on the wall of this lodge, there hung a bag, and the summer was inside the bag. Nobody could get near it because it was being guarded by a sandhill crane and a frog. Even when all the summer creatures went out to hunt, those two guardians, they always stayed behind. And if anybody was ever seen approaching the island, then the guards would jump into their canoes and paddle out and chase it away and shoot arrows at it just to scare it away to keep the summer safe for them. So the fisher and his friends knew it would be very, very challenging to get the bag of summer, but they came up with a plan. They put their heads together. The owl flew towards the lodge where the crane and the frog sat guarding the precious treasure. The owl landed and peeked inside to see where the bag was hanging. Next, the muskrat, he swam across to the island and chewed on the canoe's paddles to weaken them. Caribou, the strongest swimmer of all the animals, he started to swim across toward the island. And as soon as the guards spotted him, of course, they jumped in their canoes and began paddling towards him as fast as they could. Now, Caribou, he swam as fast as he could to get away from the island, but then the paddles broke because they were weakened by the muskrat chewing on them, so the guards were trapped and stranded on the water. Well, then Caribou had the opportunity to double back to the island, caught the frog and the crane by surprise, overwhelmed them, overpowered them, and he grabbed the bag of summer and ran back across the water until he met up with the other winter animals. And they all took turns carrying that secret bag of summer back into their world. Now, when finally the canoes drifted to shore, the guards could jump out and start chasing the other animals. They were tracking them through the forest, following their trail and everything before that they could see the evidence of. Before long, they caught sight of the fisher. He was carrying the bag in his mouth. Now, to get away from them, he scampered up a tree, but he couldn't quite get high enough to escape the arrows. Now, Fisher had a magical power. He was actually impervious to most injury, but there was one place on his tail where he was subject to injury if they could catch him there. And as luck would have it, one of the arrows caught him in that part of his tail. And when that happened, the force of the arrow threw him out of the tree and up into the sky with the secret bag of summer. Well, the summer fell out of his mouth and fell to the earth, and thankfully some of the other animals caught it where they could then open it and share the summer weather with everyone else. And now we know that we get 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter in the sky in the year. Now, the great spirit of the sky, the great spirit of the universe, he respected Fisher's bravery and his intelligence and how willing he was to sacrifice himself to share all this benefit with everybody. So what he did is he decided to put Fisher into the stars so that he would be prevented from falling to earth to his death, and we would be stayed permanently among the stars, and we see him every year through the night sky. Now, in the wintertime, the Fisher actually falls down. The constellation of the Big Dipper drops towards the northern horizon and stays low. And then in the springtime, the constellation and the Fisher starts to climb the eastern sky and regain its position high in the summertime sky again. Now, if you look at the Big Dipper, I mentioned it before, we've got 3 stars in the handle, and you can see there's a bend in the handle, and that's thought to be the place where the Fisher's tail broke when he got injured by the arrow. So I thought that was a really interesting story. There are actually more of these stories if you actually Google the story of the Ojig, that's O-J-I-I-G. There's another variation that talks about the animals climbing up a mountain and trying to break a hole into the sky so that they could escape into the summertime world and bring the summertime weather back. Really fun stories. All right.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing. I'm going to share a couple extra resources in the chat. We do have a planisphere available that has different cultures on it. It has Lakota, Dakota, Ojibwe, Innu, I think, and Cree, and Greek as well. And so that's in the chat. And as well as that, we also have, so that's the first link that I just sent out. For those watching on YouTube, this will be in the description afterwards. The second link there is to a book written by Annette Lee, Carl Gobboy, William Wilson, and Jeffrey Tibbets, which is where these pictures in Stellarium came from. And it's called the Ojibwe Sky Star Map Constellation Guide.
I've got it. I'll show you.
Have you got it? Okay, off he goes. And so that's available. There it is on the Rask store. And I think it was for a while available on Amazon as well. And for those who live near Killarney Provincial Park, it's available there too. I believe the Starfinder, the Indigenous Starfinder, is only available on RASC's page. Those are both put together by the Native Skywatchers group. And I'm going to link their talk about Ojibwe astronomy in the chat, which I just did. And finally, if you want a copy just of the Ojibwe Starfinder, there's a copy in that second link. And finally, nope, that's a lie. I have one more thing to say after this. I will also link the Ojibwe People's Dictionary, which is put together at, I believe, a university in the US somewhere, which has Ojibwe pronunciations of some of the words that you'll see in these stories. So that's all in the chat. I will add it to the YouTube description. And for those who are in the chat, Avon has left. I gave them permission and they were having trouble finding out how to do it. So they have gone and there will be no more spam on that side. Okie dokie. So I'm going to tell stories that many of you have heard probably more frequently than some of the Indigenous stories, because unfortunately that's what our education system leans on a lot of the time. So, so I'm going to tell you a story about the Greek constellations. And in this case, we're going to talk about not everyone's favorite, but certainly one of the more recognizable constellations, Orion. And now, for those of you who've seen this in the sky, you can see that he's holding a sword up above his head and a shield in front of him, like in this picture. He is a mighty hunter, and he was a mighty hunter, in all fairness. He was a very strong hunter and very capable. But his issue was that because he was very capable and very strong, he often got a little braggy. And he would talk a lot about how great he was. And we all know some people like that, and sometimes they have a point. Sometimes it gets annoying. And he chose to brag to the wrong person. He chose to brag to Artemis. Artemis, as you can tell, is also a mighty hunter, and she is in fact the goddess of hunting. So that was a poor choice, Orion. He bragged to her saying that he could hunt any animal on Earth and that he is like the master of his field. He could get any animal he wanted to. So she took that as a challenge, and she sent a scorpion after him. And the scorpion, maybe it's not seen as like the usual kind of animal that would win a fight like this, because it's very small. Usually scorpions are quite little, but they do have that really painful stinger. And so the scorpion went to hunt, or to get back at Orion following Artemis's orders. And they fought, and even though the scorpion was still so small, he managed to take down Orion. So Orion learned his lesson. I believe Chris has told me that Orion was actually healed from that sting by another person in the stars, Ophiuchus, who we can look at in a few minutes, who is now stomping on the scorpion.
Yeah, I can show you everybody if you want.
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to wrap it up. So to commemorate that battle, Zeus put the scorpion up in the sky. And in fact, actually, Artemis requested that Orion be put up in the sky as well. The scorpion is up there to commend him for his bravery and for his fight. And Orion is up there to remind people not to be too proud and certainly not to brag to the wrong people. And to keep them from fighting in the sky, Zeus put them on opposite sides of the sky. So this you'll see soon, and I can bring this up in Stellarium in a second. Orion is allowed to hunt in the winter sky, so he's up all winter long. And then as the summer comes along, the scorpion rises, Orion sets, the scorpion chases Orion out of the sky and dominates the summer sky. So Orion and Scorpius as constellations in the sky are never up at the same time. Orion is only up in the winter and Scorpius is only up in the summer. So there you go, there you have it. And helpful because it gives you an idea of where everything is in the sky. Do you want to, Chris, share your screen, or would you like me to share my screen?
I can share, you could talk over it.
Okay.
So just to remind everybody, so there's Orion setting in the west, and by the time we get to the point where he's coming down, you can see that
there's Ophiuchus coming up, which is the sign that Scorpius is coming.
So we can see Orion's going to disappear in a moment, and these little stars here are part of Scorpius's claws that are coming up.
There he goes. I was always told as well that that Sagittarius, who is chasing Scorpius, had his arrow trained on him to make sure that Scorpius behaved as well.
That could very well be. That could very well be. And if I just bring up the picture here, you can see how Ophiuchus, who's associated with healing, kind of has his feet under, you know, on top of Scorpius, just to keep him down, to protect Orion.
Everyone's got different allegiances. There's a lot of drama in the stars.
Now, just this constellation of Scorpius is very nicely visible during the summertime months, like July, August. And if you do get a chance to see it, look for the bright star Antares and then this hook shape of stars below it. If you've seen the movie Moana, this set of stars in New Zealand is actually, or in the South Pacific, is considered to be Maui's fishhook. Remember Maui in the movie had the big fishhook? So they call this, they don't call this Scorpius, they call this Maui's fishhook.
And I'm also going to take the opportunity to, once I find it, link a talk again by the Native Skywatchers in conjunction with NASA that discussed Hawaiian astronomy, because that was one of my favorite talks that they've done. And it's absolutely fascinating to hear about. So I just linked it in the chat to hear about the way that, so when Moana did this in the movie, held her hand up to measure the sky. We do similar things, but this is something that's very characteristic in Hawaii, and you can use the measurements from your thumb to different knuckle points as very specific measurements of the sky. And same goes when you hold it out like this too. So that is all outlined in the talk that I just linked. Okie dokie.
Very cool.
So that now leads us into, wait, did you want to talk about Orion SA 40?
Yeah, I just thought while we're on the topic of Orion, I'll just briefly mention that one of the cool things that you can do if you have a pair of binoculars, they don't have to be astronomy binoculars. They can be for bird watching or baseball games, any kind. You can take them outside on the next clear night, and it's getting a little late in the season for us, but there's still a chance. So you need the western sky to be clear without clouds. You want to find Orion and his 3 stars in his belt, and then look below the belt for 3 little patches of light. And again, it needs to be a night with no clouds and not really very bright moon. So for the next couple of nights, you would be able to see this. And zoom in with your binoculars, and you can see that what is here is actually a fuzzy patch of light. And this is a nebula, and it's one of the best nebulas in the entire sky for stargazers. A lot of people love this one. It's one of my favorite objects to look at. And what you're seeing is a place where stars are being born. So when hydrogen gas in the galaxy collapses on itself because of its gravity is attracting itself to other parts of the cloud, as soon as the density of the cloud gets high enough, then stars can coalesce and begin to shine. And in the case of the Orion Nebula, you're seeing the process midway through. So the cloud is collapsing, but already some of the stars have begun to be born and to be shining. And if you grab your telescope and look in the middle of this patch of light, you're going to see it in black and white. So to get color, you need to take a photograph. But in a telescope or binoculars, you'll see it kind of as a gray color. But if you get your telescope and zoom in, there's stars in the middle of the nebula, and there's a patch that form a little kind of a crooked box. It's called a trapezoid shape. And these stars are baby stars that were born from this cloud of gas, and they're shining, and their energy is causing the gas to glow with this reds and pink color. And so you can get reds from hydrogen gas, you can get blues from the sunlight scattering. Remember I showed you the Pleiades cluster with the blue? So if you mix the blue and the red, you get pinks and purples, and that's why the photograph is sort of pinks and purples. So this object is, it's pretty far away. So it's a couple of thousand, let's see, where do we have here? Almost 2,000 light years away from us. So the light from these little stars in the gas has been traveling for almost 2,000 years to get to your eyes when you see it in the nighttime sky with your binoculars. So that's a cool thing you can do. This time of year, we're getting a little past it. It's best in sort of January, February, March, but April, we can still see it for a little while after the sun goes down. So Jen, I'll pass it over to you to talk about measuring the sky.
Yes, we're gonna use our hands. So there's a really cool trick that a lot of astronomers use. I'll ask you to stop sharing. Thank you. You read my mind. So there's a trick that a lot of astronomers use, certainly amateur astronomers, to get an idea of how far away things are in the sky from each other. And it has to do with your arm and your hand and the relation of the size of your arm and your hand to you. So this trick involves using your hand at your arm's full extension and using distances covered by your fingers and your palm of your hand or your fist or the hang loose gesture to compare the distances in space. I'm going to start off with a very basic thing in case anybody does not remember this part of their math course. We live on a globe and we see a sky, technically speaking, that is 360 degrees all the way around. Our sky, the part of our sky that isn't blocked by the Earth, is only 180 degrees. So that's 180 degrees from one horizon to the other horizon. Degrees are just a unit of measure that we use to break up the circle. 90 degrees is a quarter of the sky, plus 90 degrees equals 180. So that's the full sky. So if you were to look from horizon straight up, that would be 90 degrees, but that is too big to measure most things in the sky. So we're going to use our hands to break it down. Because we all have hands that are about, like, let's say you're 6 years old and you're physically very small, you will have physically very small hands and very small arms. So your hand will be about the same size at full extension to your eye as anyone else's hand. So even if you were to look at, let's say, Chris, who's probably got larger hands than I do, but is also generally a larger human being and therefore has probably larger arms as well, his hands, although larger when you compare them side by side, will be about the same size as they seem at arm's length to mine.
Yeah, works for everybody.
Works for everybody. So on to the tricks. If you hold up your pinky finger from one side to the other is about 1 degree. So if you had 180 pinky fingers, it would cover up the entire sky, but you don't. You just have one. If you use 3 fingers, that's about 5 degrees. So 5 from here to here. I always say it's about 10 from when you have a closed fist, from 10 from here to here.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people say this is 15, like the rock on gesture from tip of your finger to here is 15. And then finally, this is the big one, the hang loose gesture is 25 degrees from here to here. So this gesture at full arm's length will in fact stretch all the way across the Big Dipper, because the Big Dipper is 25 degrees. Hang loose.
You need to have good
yeah, you have to be able to really stretch out your fingers.
One hand might work better than the other hand.
Now, Chris, you had mentioned this, like closing one eye and then opening the other eye trick. I don't actually know this trick. Can you go over?
Well, you want to talk, you can talk about the moon first if you want to do that.
Yes, I will just quickly, so we'll mention the moon. Okay, so many people have seen the moon. The moon seems to be really big. It certainly feels really big, especially when it's close to the horizon. The moon can actually be completely covered up just by your pinky finger. The moon is only half the size of your pinky finger. It is half a degree across. So your whole pinky finger can blot out the entire moon, which is, if you're looking at your hand held out straight right now, which I recommend you do if you're not actively doing it, that seems wild. And especially if you're looking at a window, you look at that and you're like, there's no way the moon is that small. But it is. Yeah, and it's crazy. So go outside in the next couple days as the moon's getting bigger. It's still only a quarter moon, which, I mean, it sounds like it's cheating, but the full moon is in about a week and a half.
Yeah, next week.
Next week, go out and try to block it. The kind of cool thing as well to do is, so when it is close to the horizon and you have things like trees and buildings and stuff to compare it to, it does look bigger because you, inside your brain, without knowing it, are comparing the size of it to the things that are in the field of view. When it's up in the sky, it looks a lot smaller because there are no buildings next to it to compare it to. So you can actually try an experiment to see if the moon gets smaller when it goes above your head by covering it up with your pinky finger at the horizon and then covering it up with your pinky finger when it's up in the sky. So I recommend giving that a try too. It's a fun experiment. Now the blinky thing.
Yeah, so we astronomers measure the distance of stars by comparing how they move a little bit in the sky through a process that's called parallax. And you can try the experiment yourself at home. So if you put your finger up, and don't look at the computer, but look at an object in the room or maybe down the hall. So, and close one eye and look at an object beyond your finger, and then flip to the other eye, and you can see that your finger hops back and forth. And so a star that's closer to the Earth will hop back and forth compared to the stars that are at our distance. And we can do some arithmetic and trigonometry, and we can calculate how far away stars are that way. So it's called stellar parallax.
Stellar parallax, and it is it's a physical distance. And in Star Wars, they call it a unit of time or something like that, which is a
parsec.
A parsec.
Yeah, that's a parsec. So the amount that that an object, well, an angle in the sky of an object. So Jenna was talking about degrees, but if you slice that down into finer bits, then you can get arc minutes and arc seconds. And so an arc second would be the sort of an amount that a star would wiggle a little bit from one point in the year to 6 months later. And so the amount that a star moves, if it's one arc second, then it's one parallax second, then it's called a parsec. So a star that moves by 1 arc second is 1 parsec away. So parsec is a distance in space. And even though in Star Wars they said they kind of implied that it was a distance of a length of time, it's not. They fixed it later in one of the later movies. It's a distance.
Okay. And I will also mention too, I've had people come up to me and ask questions like, how come the stars don't appear to move in the night sky between spring and fall, like when the Earth is on opposite sides of its orbit? And the answer is that you're just not looking carefully enough.
Yeah, some do. Some do more than others, but you really need a precise measurement. It's a tiny.
Yeah, it's like standing at the top of the CN Tower, looking at Rochester, New York, and like moving over 0.5 centimeter. Rochester, New York doesn't really seem to move because it's so far away. But if you had really precise equipment, you'd be able to measure how far it moves. Anyway, so that was a deep dive into. If you have more questions about how we measure space, there is actually an old version. We did an episode on that in Insider's Guide, and it's on our YouTube channel, which is at RAS Canada. Go
back and watch it. And if you want to know more about stellarium, go back and watch our very first one, which is about how to use stellarium. It's very simple, really good. And you'll be able, once you have it installed, then you can use our guide to help you figure out how to use it and run it. All right, so I'm going to jump to the kind of the last item on our list here, and then leave hopefully some time for questions. And that's the best things to see in the sky during 2021 for Canadians. So let me just change set to sharing my screen, and I'm going to actually jump us through some of these events. So first thing is, and then we're going to vote and see which one you're most looking forward to. So we talked about the full moon coming up in about a week, and that full moon is going to be a supermoon. And a supermoon actually happens because the moon actually is in an elliptical orbit and sometimes a bit closer to the Earth when it looks bigger, and farther away from the Earth when the moon looks a bit smaller. And during the course of time, if you measure it, you can see the moon grow a little bigger, a little smaller, a little bigger, a little smaller. And a supermoon is defined as when the moon is full while it's close, and it's not always synchronized. It usually takes about every 14 months or so, those two cycles of close and far and phase of the moon, they line up for a few months. And so we get a few supermoons in a row. And usually there's one that's sort of super, and then a little more super, and then a most super, most closest, most large, and then it tapers off. And the one that's happening in a week is going to be a supermoon, but not the biggest supermoon. So let me just show you a picture of the difference. The difference in the sky is about the difference between a loonie and a toonie. If you held one of each up at arm's length, that would be the kind of the difference between a moon when it's closest and full and farthest when full. But usually it's in between those. And so you can see that the normal full moon is midway between these two pictures. But the perigee means close to the Earth, G is for Earth, and apogee means away from Earth. So that's a smaller moon. And so that's the supermoon. Now, the next supermoon's in a week, but the best supermoon of the year is going to be on the following month. So let me just turn these on here and go to, so on, let's see, April 26th. No, that's not the one I wanted. Yeah. So here we have the supermoon. This is the biggest supermoon of the year. And just in case you wanted to know what the difference would be, the smallest full moon of 2021 is going to be in December. Let me just click and do the December one. And I don't know if you can see the difference, but if you notice that where the edge of the moon touches the box here, so this is the mini moon, opposite of a supermoon, and we go back to the largest one. There's the supermoon. See how it sticks in behind the box? So it's quite a bit bigger than the mini.
Can you go back to the mini moon again? Yeah.
Yeah, there's the mini moon.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
quite a bit of difference. Yeah. To your unaided eyes, you're not going to notice too much difference, but that's one. So that's coming up. Let's see, I've got this being the 26th of April, but really it should be the 25th. Let me just put this on the 25th of, there we go. So that's the actual biggest moon, is on May 25th of the year. Okay, next in chronological order is the planet Venus is going to be showing up in the sky. So let's see, we've got, let me just get this set up here. So we've got Venus and Mercury are going to meet together, and I'm just going to change my horizon to get rid of my tree here. Landscape, I'm just going to go to a 0 horizon. Here we go. So here's the horizon. On May the 28th, the planet Mercury and the planet Venus are going to meet up with each other just after sunset in the evening. Now, sunset's fairly late this time of year, so it'll be probably after your dinner time. You can go outside and look to the west. If you want to try to look at them with binoculars, you have to wait till the sun has completely disappeared. It's very important that you never point your binoculars or your telescopes while the sun is still showing. You always wait until it's completely disappeared. If you do that, you might see bright, you'll notice Venus is very, very bright. It's very easy to see. And then a little dimmer, fainter speck of Mercury just to the left of it. And if it's cloudy this night on the 28th of May, the night before, Mercury will be a little above. And then on the 28th, kind of side by side. And then on the 29th, Mercury is dropping down. And that's because Mercury is finished swinging away from the sun and is heading back towards the sun. So it's actually hopping lower each night, and it's just going to pass by Venus at the end of May. All right, the next one we have, so you can consider that as your vote, but I think you'll probably want the next one. And that's a partial solar eclipse. So again, if you ever want to observe a solar eclipse in person, you have to have eclipse glasses or special filters that make it safe. Whenever any part of the sun is showing, even if the moon is mostly covering it, it's still not safe for your eyes. But you can get eclipse glasses, and Jenna can share the link to the University of Toronto is actually mailing people eclipse viewers for the eclipse. If you get your order in soon enough, you can have them in time for the eclipse, which is on June the 10th. And when the sun rises in the morning on June the 10th, the eclipse will already be happening for people in Canada. The eclipse will be visible for much of the country, but the actual total eclipse will actually be visible on a path that starts in northern Ontario, scooches through the northern part of Quebec, and then goes right over the North Pole of the Earth, and then sinks down into Siberia. So the part of the eclipse that's where the moon is mostly covering the sun. Now this eclipse is actually going to be what's called an annular eclipse. An annular eclipse means that the moon will never completely hide the sun. It'll make a ring. So you'll have a ring of bright sunlight around the moon. And that's because this eclipse is going to happen while the moon is a mini moon. And a mini moon, because the moon's farther from the Earth, it's not big enough to loom big enough to cover the whole sun. So it becomes an annular solar eclipse. So that's June 10th. Get your eclipse viewer from a magazine maybe, or from a University of Toronto, and you can get up early. You have to set the alarm. You have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you have to have a vision or a view of the northeastern sky with no trees in the way, no hills in the way, no buildings, because it'll be low.
I'm gonna do some real quick shout outs for which I don't necessarily have links. Rask Sudbury is partnering with timeanddate.com to offer live streams if you're interested in watching it live in English. And Rask Montreal is partnering with a bunch of people, but notably I think Rio Tinto Planetarium and Montmegantic Observatory to offer you views and commentary in French. So
That's
there are
right.
those two live streams. We will have a website on rask.ca with that information, as well as you can follow us on TikTok. Actually, we just started a TikTok where we will be posting solar eclipse content in the month leading up to the solar eclipse too.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of neat things you can do. You can project the sun, the eclipsed sun, through a pinhole, or maybe a colander, like a kitchen strainer, and you can make little crescents on a piece of paper on the ground. The eclipse will last until about 6:38 Eastern time, and you've got to convert that for your own time zone if you live farther west. So it'll be varied through the country. So that's the partial solar eclipse. Okay, how about this one? July 12th, we're back to Venus again. This time Venus is going to meet with Mars. So Mars is going to be heading this way, sinking back towards the sun, while Venus is sort of climbing away from the sun, and they'll pass each other with the moon after dinner time, after sunset, on July the 12th. And again, if it's cloudy that night, you can see that Mars the night before, Mars will come down this way. There's Mars and Venus. So for 3 or 4 nights, they'll be close enough to see together, certainly in your binoculars or maybe even a backyard telescope. But again, the same warning about making sure the sun is gone before you ever use a telescope or binoculars towards the area where it was. Okay, make sure it's completely below the horizon. So those are some Mars meetups with Mercury and Venus. And our next one is...
As you jump to the next one, I'm going to answer 2 quick questions in the chat. I'm pretty sure Alberta and BC will not see that partial solar eclipse. Just a heads up that it finishes before sunrise for all of you out west, I'm afraid. And for Joanne, who mentioned that U of T is out of stock of the eclipse viewers already, sad times. Sky News does have them available for purchase if you want. They look like this, and they're like $3 or something like that. So I will find the link and I will add it to the chat.
Thanks, Jenna. Another big event for the year is going to be the Perseid meteor showers. Let me just get my meteor showers turned on here. So the Perseid meteor shower is a meteor shower that happens every year in August. It's one of the neatest ones of the year because the weather is nice and warm, and you can go out and spend the night just laying back and watching the shooting stars cross the sky. It's called the Perseid meteor shower because the meteors will seem to be coming from the same area of the sky as the constellation of Perseus. They're not coming from Perseus. They're just that happens to be the direction that the Earth is traveling when we're hitting this cloud of debris in our solar system, and the particles are being captured by our gravity and shooting across the sky as they fall to Earth. And so the best time to see these meteors is for the Perseids. You can basically start watching as soon as it's dark. Some meteor showers are better in the pre-dawn, but this one is really good, usually all night long. So around the August 12th or 13th weekend, and just stay tuned for my Skylights or for Rask or your local news. We'll be talking about the meteor shower on the Weather Channel and things like that. Now, meteor showers are often made or broken by what the moon is doing, because the meteors, even though they seem bright, they're not that bright. And if you've got a bright moon, it can ruin the show. But this year, the moon is going to set early in the evening. And so we'll be able to enjoy a dark sky for that weekend for the meteor showers. Also, you don't need to get up, after midnight and look towards Perseus. You just need to look up, because the meteors will cross the sky from every direction. They'll just seem to be traveling in a direction that's always away from Perseus. But you don't need to worry about whether Perseus or where Perseus is. Just find a nice open sky, relax, and look up. Don't stare at your phone. Put your phone away. Put your tablet away. Just make your eyes dark adapted and look up. All right, what's next? Jupiter and Saturn. So I showed you that they're in the morning sky. Right now they're in the morning sky. They'll be back into view in the evening around the middle of August. So by the time we get to the middle of August, nice hot weather will arrive, and we'll be able to go outside around 10 o'clock after it gets dark and look for the 2 bright dots of Jupiter and Saturn. Last year, they were closer together. Let's see if I can center up Jupiter and show you last year. Go like this. So last year, the two planets were quite close together. And this year they're farther apart, but they're still going to chase each other across the sky all year long. So they're already visible in the morning sky now. And as each month goes on, they rise earlier and earlier and earlier until eventually by the time we get to August, they'll be rising around 8:30 in the evening. So you'll be able to enjoy them all evening long. And then they'll stay visible until the fall as well. Now let's talk about the lunar X.
Ooh. Chris is
show
the
you a
entire
picture of a
reason
lunar
I've
X.
even ever seen the lunar X.
All right, I'm going to show you a picture of a lunar X. So when the sun hits the moon at the right angle, the edges of a few craters combine to produce an X shape on the moon. Can you see the X?
Yeah.
And it lasts for about 3 hours or so. So it starts out weak, it gets a bit stronger, and then it fades out. And I always mention these in my skylights if anybody wants to keep tabs on that. So there's the lunar X. The lunar X happens a handful of times during the year around the first quarter moon. So that's when the moon is half lit in the evening sky and lit on the right-hand side towards the sun that went down. And at the right time, within about an hour plus or minus, you can look at the moon with your binoculars and look for the little X shape. And you can see it in a telescope too if you have a telescope, but you don't need it. Binoculars usually, if they're strong, you might see them with your good quality binoculars. While you're there, look for the V. There's also a V. And there's also an L. And up here somewhere, there's kind of a backwards E. And just grab a crater to make an O and you've got love. So L-O-V and E on the moon. So that's a fun thing to do. So there's going to be a lunar X coming up on, let's see, May the 18th. But the sky won't be that dark yet when the lunar X shows up. It's going to peak around 8:30 in the evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on May the 18th, if you want to make note of that. But this one is going to be much better. So on November 11th, the sun will be down lower. It'll be darker, and this is the night where you'll get one of the best lunar X's of the year on November the 11th.
What time is it?
That's going to peak around 6 p.m. Eastern time. So you have to convert to your local time zone and then plus or minus an hour or so on each side. Maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. It depends on the circumstances, but you've got a pretty good window of time that you can see it in. And finally, and get ready to vote, about a week later on November 19th, we get an almost total lunar eclipse from Canada. So the moon is dipping into the Earth's shadow, and that produces the dark, sort of reddish, blood red, blood moon effect that you might hear about in the media. And that's because the only light that can get to the moon is light that's coming over the Earth's horizon, and it's sort of like sunset light, and that makes the moon a red color. Now, the moon passes through the Earth's shadow from time to time, producing lunar eclipses, but depending on the geometry, sometimes the moon is deep in the middle of the shadow, and sometimes it just misses it. And this is one of these situations where the moon didn't quite all the way get into the shadow. And so when it's at maximum around 4 a.m. Eastern time, and again, you can adjust for where you live in Canada or other parts of the world, there'll be a few percent of the moon that isn't in the shadow. So you'll get this bright little edge and then the dark reddish part towards the upper right. So that's why I'm calling it an almost total lunar eclipse. And so those are your options to vote on. What does everybody think? What are they most looking forward to?
Hold on.
So we've got the big supermoon, Venus meeting Mercury and Mars, partial solar eclipse, lunar X, Jupiter and Saturn, and then the almost total eclipse.
All right, and I've just launched the poll. And so this is going to be useful for us so that we know what to prepare for on social media as well with information. So get your votes in. You've had 25 seconds so far, and we'll give you another couple seconds to get those votes in. I'm so far kind of sad about how few of you have said the lunar X. Maybe it's just because I am so touched by Chris texting me at 9 p.m. being like, come on, Jenna, get outside. The lunar X is visible.
It's good to have an astronomer in your pocket to remind you of some of these things. But I hope everybody made notes so that they can remember when to look.
You can always go back and rewatch the video. All right, I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, get those last votes in. 3, 2, 1. And we have a winner. It is the Perseid meteor shower, which I am not surprised about. The Perseid meteor shower is amazing, and to have it without a moon is going to be great. But the almost total lunar eclipse between midnight and dawn will also be.
Yeah, I didn't mention it. You may have noticed in my little time box that eclipse was happening at 4 o'clock in the morning.
It's going to be early. Yeah.
It's going to be one of these stay up all night or get up early to see that one.
Yeah. So for
that's not always true, but that happens this year.
There are 20 people who are excited in particular for the almost total lunar eclipse. So I'm counting on you 20 people to go out and get photos at 4 a.m. so that I can stay sleeping.
In November.
In November, yes, that's the other. That's the other.
Yeah, me too. I'm a fan of the Perseid meteor shower. It's a great time to be out on a summer night looking at shooting stars. It's fantastic.
There's a quick question in the Q&A from Paul asking, isn't there a partial lunar eclipse on the 26th of May? And will it be a supermoon? I do believe, and I actually checked this while we were talking and then promptly forgot, but there is
I only mentioned the ones that are visible from Canada. So there are other eclipses, yeah. And you can watch live streams of them, but.
So the eclipse in May is visible partially at moonset. It is not a total eclipse for us. It's only a partial eclipse for us. Yes, at moonset. And then for the most part, the people who can see the entire lunar eclipse will be the people living in the Pacific Ocean. So that is a very small number of people. But if you happen to be on either, I think, the Hawaiian Islands or in Fiji or the east coast of Australia, some parts of Indonesia, New Zealand, you should be able to get the full lunar eclipse on May 26th.
Yeah, I can show you here. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, going the wrong way here.
As you're finding it, there's a question from Peter asking if all the web references will be available after today's Zoom show. They will all be, and they already all are, in the YouTube description. So if you head over to youtube.com/c/RASCanada, I'll type it in the chat. You can find all past episodes of Insider's Guide there, along with the resources for this episode in this particular video's description.
Yeah.
There you go.
Any other questions?
I feel like there was one more. Oh, I just wanted to mention, I wanted to shout us out as well and say that there's some really cool reasons as to why we have these like solar eclipse and lunar eclipse partnered up together. We always have one after the other within 2 weeks of each other. We will be dropping these sorts of education 30-second videos on Rask social media in the next month when it comes to eclipses. So feel free to follow us there.
Yeah, actually, I can actually show you the, just bring this back up. So there's the ecliptic. And so this is actually the Earth's orbit around the sun. So the ecliptic, the shadow, Earth's shadow always brackets the ecliptic. And you can see that when the moon is farther from the ecliptic, then it's not quite into the shadow, right? But there are times when the moon is right on it, and that's when you can see it, total eclipse. So every year it's a little different. Sometimes we get luckier and sometimes we're not as lucky. Sometimes we don't get any, and sometimes we get only a moon half in the shadow, partial eclipse.
Mm-hmm. And then one last question from Warren that I don't know the answer to. How many different Canadian Indigenous groups are on Stellarium? You can go and check to see. Chris, maybe if you want to do that quickly. Yeah. I will also just mention though, because we have partnered with Annette in the past, that sometimes the pictures in Stellarium aren't taken, like the Indigenous drawings aren't taken with permission. So just be aware to do your own research outside of Stellarium. It is open source, and so people will put things up, but they're not always taken with permission.
Yeah, so the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the Ojibwe are Annette Lee's artwork from her books and her sky charts that you shared before. Let's see.
You can go through there and explore by going to the sky viewing conditions and going to star lore. And there are a bunch of different groups there. Yay. All right, I think that we're out of questions. I think that pretty much wraps it up, eh?
Yeah. Let's see if I wanted to point out a couple more things. I did have some lists of some objects that people can look at if they have binoculars or telescopes. I'll just see if I can mention a couple that I haven't already talked about. You want to look for Mars. So if you go out after dinner tonight, Mars is about halfway up the western sky. little bit lower than halfway actually, because there's Z and there's the horizon. So Mars is less than halfway up. Let's see if I make this at 9 o'clock. It's about halfway. And Mars is actually a reddish color, and it's a little red dot, and it's making a red triangle with Betelgeuse, which is reddish, and Aldebaran, which is reddish. So they form like a kind of a tilted triangle of reddish stars and plus Mars. Notice that stars are different colors. So Betelgeuse is kind of reddish, Aldebaran's kind of reddish, Capella's kind of yellow, and you'll see those on those stars named on your sky chart. Don't forget the Pleiades with your binoculars. You can look at Taurus's face with your binoculars. That's a cool thing to look at with all the stars there. There's, let's see, there's a neat little cluster here in Cancer. What else have I wanted to mention? Talked about Polaris. Yeah, so I think we pretty much covered it. There are a couple galaxies that you can find near the handle of the Big Dipper, but we can talk about that another time.
I have sent out the list that you had included. So if people want to take a look at any of the targets, they can. And last question from Peter, what is the best website to see the 3D relationships of the sun, planets, and constellations for beginners? I personally like Solar System Scope, which I will link. Chris, do you have a favorite?
That's where that would have been my first answer to. Okay. It's fun. I like that.
It's super fun. Yeah, it's good.
It's also an app. You can also put it on your phone or your tablet, Solar System Scope. It's cool.
And if you zoom out far enough, you can see how far away the stars are from our solar system as well, which is pretty cool. NASA's Eyes is another good one as well. If you are interested more in exploring missions, it's an app and not a website, and it takes up an unbelievable amount of space on your computer. So it only works if you have that space to play with, but it's super fun too.
Yeah, the Solar System Scope is fun because you can set it up in a mode where all the planets are enlarged, so they're really cool looking. And if you want to be more rigorous, scientifically rigorous, you can also set it to realistic mode where the planets are their normal size and things are scaled as they should be. So it's a really neat resource.
Thank you everybody for joining today. If you are joining us from the library, you will be automatically registered for the rest of these sessions. And so you'll get a notification next week about what our next session, 2 weeks from now, about what our next session is, which is going to be.
It might be Spring Galaxies, but I can't remember if it was.
Yes, it is. No, it's spotting satellites. We're going to look at how to.
Oh, satellites. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And then a heads up as well for those who are interested in the eclipse. We have an eclipse specific, solar viewing specific session on May 26th as well. I think May 25th or 26th, whatever Tuesday that week is. We'll be talking about safely viewing the sun so that you can get ready for the eclipse.
Excellent. Thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had fun.
We will see you all in 2 weeks. And for those who are joining for Explore the Moon, or for the Moon at Noon, we'll see you in 2 days.
Excellent. Clear skies, everybody. Hope you can get out and see some of these things. See you later.